This is the second time this website has been down in 2 days and I still can't order my unicorn. What is going on? Now, chances are it's probably a DDoS attack. And in today's session, we're going to be understanding a little bit more about that particular attack and kind of understanding what's really involved. So without wasting time, I'm glad you're here. Let's get straight into it. So what is a DDoS? That stands for Distributed Denial of Service. Now, DDoS attacks have been here for years and are just getting more popular over the years as technology grows and evolve. So the current wars going on around the world are also having a large impact. So targeting resources to those locations to cause disruptions. So we're seeing attacks that have never happened on countries before to this scale, simply of what's going on around the world. There are even packages you can purchase on the dark web. So DDoS as a service, we call it, where we can actually log into a Tor browser and get into the dark web marketplace and actually purchase these. And you will be surprised how affordable they are. So what are you purchasing? It's really access to hundreds of thousands of endpoints, possibly going into the millions. And today, we're going to be reviewing some concepts that will help with understanding what is going on behind these attacks. What do these attacks look like from a large scale? And some of the most common types of DDoS attacks with ways to keep yourself and your organizations protected. And then, as I always love to do, I built out some statistics of the 3 top countries that are getting DDoSed and the most reasons as to why that is the case. Now, before we do get into how a DDoS attack works, there are a couple of frameworks and theories I want to touch upon first. Now, the first is the CIA Triad, which is an information security framework where all businesses build upon one way or another for cybersecurity. Now, the CIA has 3 pillars. Confidentiality, which is effectively ensuring only the correct people are able to view the content. For example, access to that certain file on OneDrive. It may contain sensitive data within, so I need to make sure only the correct people with the correct permissions can access these files. We then have integrity, which is that original document I uploaded on OneDrive wasn't changed and remains untouched to its original format, because someone can change that and cause all sorts of damages. Let's imagine it has the financial status and records of the previous year, making sure that that was untouched so we have the accurate information. And then finally, availability, which is the real star of the conversation, as DDoS attacks target the availability of an organization's systems. So we need to make sure our data, our sites, our resources are always available to the people that have access to that. Now, for example, Amazon, they always need to keep their sites up and running and available to their customers so they don't damage that revenue stream. Now, there are other elements we could cover, such as non-repudiation and authenticity, but this is enough to really understand what we're trying to achieve with this particular conversation. Now, a concept which is important is understanding the TCP three-way handshake. Why? Because this will allow you to understand how your PC will connect to a server, for example, and how we can use this for a DDoS SYN flood attack. Just one of many different attacks which we will go ahead and touch upon later down the line. So when your PC wants to connect to that server, we will send a SYN, which stands for synchronize, which is the initial connection using the IP address of that server. And the server then can choose to allow, deny the connection, and then allocate resources. Now that is important. It will allocate resources for every connection, and then a network port. Then replying back with a SYNAC, which is a synchronized acknowledgement that is acknowledging its connection request and says, hey, these are the protocols I can use to initiate a full connection. And then once received by my computer, all is well, we can then send a final acknowledgement to send over all the details and go ahead and begin that communication. Now, let's look at this from a bad actor angle. With a DDoS, they would send out multiple SYNs from multiple different locations. Now, just remember, a DOS is coming from a single source. Now, a DDoS is coming from multiple sources. So all those SYN packets require resources, as we mentioned, to be allocated. And after so many packets being sent, the resources will begin to throttle on that server because a bad actor isn't replying with that final act to complete the handshake. And then finally, the server will become unavailable. And that's called a SYN flood attack, one of many ways an attacker can actually use for a DDoS attack. But what does that actually look like? So I've built out a very simple, straightforward concept to help us understand this. Now, as a lot of attacks start, it starts with a friendly email. As humans are really the weakest link within the cybersecurity chain, there are chances we will click on that email. Now, it doesn't have to be a work laptop, it could either be a personal laptop or mobile phone. But originally, we'll start with an email. And it only takes one bad day for us to be a bit more vulnerable with our judgment. Now, from there, you click on that link, possibly downloading something in the back end, or message to download a software that will help you with XY task. And maybe it does indeed help you with that task, but adjacent to that, you've downloaded something which is acting as something else, something benign. That could be a Trojan malware. And while you continue with your day, your machine is ready to be called upon and start an attack to a certain IP, which could be that server on the far right. So what now? Well, if you talk back from a global perspective, you're only one of hundreds of thousands or even millions that are targeting that one software. So soon enough, there is a botnet, a fleet of endpoints, mobile devices, all those elements which have an IP that could be able to communicate out to the World Wide Web and start to try to connect to that website, which is hosted in that particular server. And that's going to use up the resources, which is why those endpoints can seem sluggish and slow. So remember, on our previous slide, all of those open connections without completing the handshake, for example. So soon enough, there will be a single server that will start to slow down and eventually reboot due to the resources of overutilization. And who can start that attack? It could be someone who's connected to the command and control server, someone that can initiate that particular attack whenever needed. And that's the goal. When they ask for, whatever needed, is it money? We won't stop this attack until you pay up. Is it political, for example, due to the wars that are happening around the world? There are many different examples. Now, this will stop genuine users as accessing that site and possibly even having to order from another site, a competitor perhaps, due to the inconvenience of that site being down or slow. So what are the common types of attacks that we really see? Now, there are really three types of attacks we see. We have volume-based attacks, we have protocol and network-based, and we have application-based attacks as well. So volume attacks are designed to unleash an overwhelming amount of traffic to its destination. And that's going to be from multiple angles to increase the chances of disruption and overutilization of resources. Now, the common types of attacks used in a volume base are UDP flood attacks, ICMP flood attacks, and spoofed packet attacks as well. Next up is protocol and network layer attacks. These really focus on specific targets such as network infrastructure and management tools. So some common types used in protocol and network attacks are SYN floods, which is what we covered earlier, and things like Smurf DDoS and ping of deaths. Now finally, the application layer attacks. That's going to target the top layer of the OSI model, referenced on the right-hand side. Now the OSI stands for Open Systems Interconnection, where, to put in simple terms, allows different devices from different vendors to communicate using a common standard of protocols. Now basically how all our devices and systems as well as applications really communicate with each other now. So the target with this attack is to send a high amount of traffic requests to the applications which seem legitimate but are utilizing the resources for that application. Now the common types are HTTP GET requests and HTTP POST. Now we've talked about the different types of attacks. There are ways to prevent this from happening. It's really to incorporate protections such as zone protection and DOS protection, which previously you would have to purchase a separate standalone solution for, but this does come as a subscription for most modern next-gen firewalls, and even more modern, we're talking about SASE solutions. So these are just a few ways to keep protected. Now, listen, I've been in cases where there was a DDoS attack and I had to block the IP range upstream with the ISP. And that was due to the resources of the firewall being so overconsumed that I needed to remain protected on the actual firewall as well, because the resources of the CPU of my firewall was being so heavily utilized, everything else was incredibly slow. So there are multiple ways to prevent this from happening. So I wanted to give a quick rundown of the different countries which are experiencing the most types of attacks. So it doesn't come with surprise that China is #1 for the most sourced, as well as the most attacked country for DDoS. Now, reasons why China is such a valuable target for others is its large internet user base. So although India has taken over the general population of humans living in the country, China still trumps for over 1 billion active internet users, which allows other countries to really take advantage of that. Now that makes China an incredibly powerful country, however, an incredibly vulnerable country as well. The economic significance with China is there are more online e-commerce platforms ever. And that makes them a prime target for attacks to disrupt operations or even an opportunity for money to be made. Now, political motivations, protesting, and activists are also other common reasons why China is getting attacked so much with DDoS, as well as the presence of botnets. Now, due to China having a significant number of compromised devices already recruited for botnets, a lot of attacks are sourcing from China, as well as being a destination to attack as well. Now, the most common type of attack they experience are volume attacks, focusing on SYN, TCP, UDP flood attacks, which is really focusing on layer 4 of the OSI model. The United States of America, the pioneer, the leader of cybersecurity, where most cybersecurity organizations are either hosted or started up there. Now, it comes at no surprise due to USA's economical and political standpoint. There has always been that pressure for USA's defense, not only from an organization level, but a government level as well. Now, the most common types of attacks we see out there for the US is HTTP attacks. That's really focusing on the layer 7 within the OSI model, the application layer. Now, the largest record that we have for the United States is really within Microsoft, where they mitigated a DDoS attack within their Azure infrastructure, which a customer was really using. Now, that was believed to be around 3.5 terabytes per second. Now, if you do the maths, that is around 3,500 gigabytes per second. And as I mentioned, with the correct technologies, you can be able to prevent this, but it does test their capabilities, and the next attack could be significantly larger. Now, this may come as a surprise, but the beautiful Brazil is now heading to 3rd place of the most DDoS attacks. Now, the interesting thing is 5 years ago, Brazil wasn't even on the top 10, let alone the top 3. So why is that? Brazil is going through an economical growth, which is also growing their digital expansion as well. Now, due to its expanding economy, they are making themselves a prime target for attackers. The more e-commerce sites than ever within Brazil that we've seen from a record perspective. It's really only effectively adding more bandwidth for cyber criminals to explore. So it is a trend. Cyber criminals are targeting markets increasing within their economy, and Brazil happens to be now the prime target. And guess what? All of those attacks are not even internationally. They are domestic as well. So who knows what the status would be for 2025. I still believe China and US will be on the top 3, but with India now taking over the spot for the highest general population, will we see an increase with their presence? Something we would have to wait and see. And that's it, a quick 15-minute introduction into what a DDoS is, the different types of attack within a DDoS, as well as the countries which are suffering the most with a DDoS attack. I find it really interesting that the more devices we have within the world, the higher chance of an increased volume attack for that particular server, that IP address. So it's incredibly important to make sure that you are protecting your machines with the correct technologies such as an EDR, making sure that your firewalls have the correct policies in place, subscriptions to prevent that from happening, and making sure you really be careful what you click on. Because it only takes one click for something like this just to start starting. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for listening.